So Gaea 2.2 has been out for 2 to 3 weeks now, and I thought it'd be cool to teach you all how to set up a actual landscape within Gaea and then import it from Gaea to Unreal Engine and set up your landscape in Unreal Engine. So if you're curious about that workflow and want to learn how to use Gaea to set up realistic landscapes, then let's jump into it. So Gaea is one of the best softwares out there that help you build realistic landscapes. So it's incredibly helpful. And to download it, you can go over here to quadspinner.com/Gaea to download. I will have a link to this in the description below that will take you directly to this page. But once you're at this page, you can click over here to download, and then you can install. If you are curious if you have to pay, they do have a free version of Gaea last time I checked, but you can only export up to, I believe, 1K landscape files, which, to be honest, will work most of the time. And then the other good thing is if you ever do decide to pay for Gaea, they have a one-time payment method, which is beautiful. In most cases, it is just $99, one-time payment, and then you continually get updates thereon after. So highly suggest the software in general. But again, if you're new to Gaea, you can definitely get used to the software before you ever feel like you need to buy it. So once you're on this page, you can go over here and install it. And then once you install it, you can open it up. So once you open up Gaea, this is going to be the first thing you see. Over here on the right, you have new project, open project, and then below you have the projects that you've already created. In your case, if you're brand new, you probably don't have a project here. In my case, I do have a project that I will be opening and working off of, which is going to be the Gaea Beginner Mountains. So I'm going to open that up. And then if you kind of hover over the main graph and just scroll out, it will show you your entire nodes. So Gaea, generally speaking, is a node-based system that helps you build upon the prior node as you go through. Again, I'll be teaching you this step by step. Do not worry about already seeing the nodes built. I'm just going to be using this as a template and build it again right below it. The first thing I want to note is this graph 1. So this is our main graph, which is creating our landscape, and this is where all our nodes are going to be. On the left here, you can see all the different node selections as well. And if you click on any of these, you can see a bunch of different options to create your landscape. Over here on the right, you'll see terrain and build. Terrain is really just going to give you a kind of list of all the different nodes that are currently in your graph 1. And then build is where you can actually render your landscape. Now over here on the right, depending on which node you click on, you're going to have different menus pop up here. So if I click over here and click rugged, you're going to see a different menu pop up here, and it's going to let you adjust how your landscape is going to look. And then up here on the top left are a bunch of different menus, similar to pretty much every other animation program you've ever used. Okay, so now on to controls. If you want to pan around your actual graph, you can hold down on your middle mouse button and pan around that way. And if you want to zoom in or out, you just scroll in and scroll out. So very simple controls there. The next one, to kind of move this around, I've adjusted my controls, and I've also adjusted the way my toolbox looks. So I'm just going to go in and kind of show you how to adjust those settings so you are aligned with how I'm working. So to do that, click this just so we can have a landscape shown. I'm going to go over here to Tools and go down to Options. And the first thing I'm going to do is click on Nested by Family and then switch this over to Show All. And then make sure all of these 3 are clicked. So Show Icons and Toolbox, Show Family Name, and Show Icons. And then click Accept Changes, which means when you click on this, you're going to see all the different node options available to you instead of having them nested into Adjust, Effect, and Profile. I prefer this because then I can kind of see all the options, and especially as someone who's beginning, it's very helpful because, again, you know what's available to you, whereas if it was all nested, it's much harder to see. The next thing I want to do is go over to Tools, go down to Options again, and head over to Navigation. Now, yours might have the Hold Alt button clicked on. In my case, I click them all off, and I have the rotate as the left, the pan as the middle click, and the zoom as the right. I prefer this because I don't feel the need to have to continually click on my keyboard to pan around my landscape. So in my case, let me click on something so we have a landscape. I'm going to hold left click to move my landscape around. I'm going to hold middle click to kind of pan it left and right. So left is going to help me orbit around a specific location. The middle click is going to let me kind of pan. And then the right click is how I zoom in and out. How the right click works is if you hold the right click and then move your mouse forward, you are going to zoom in forward. And if you move your mouse backwards, you are going to zoom out. I definitely prefer this because, again, I don't feel the need to constantly click on my keyboard to be able to orient myself around my scene. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is right click to get the menu to pop up and type in Perlin, and you're going to get a Perlin node. Now, if you're ever curious where this node kind of lives, it's all color coded. So in this case, this green connects with this primitive green. And if you click on it and go down, you're going to see the Perlin node right here. So inside the Perlin node, you can adjust anything to be rigid, billowy, or FMB, as well as playing with the general scale of your scene. So I'm just going to play around with the gain and the height to kind of get a general look that I'm going for. And then once that is done, I can bring it over here and type in wizard. And wizard is really a easy to use erosion node, and I really like this one a lot. If you're ever curious where you can find it, again, it's all color coded, so it's in the simulate. And if you go down here, we have a bunch of different erosion nodes. Wizard is one of them. So within wizard, you're going to have strength, density, material, channel depth, channel width, deposits removal, and bulk. Now, this right here is a little too much erosion for what we're going for, so I'm going to actually change everything to be medium all the way down. And you're going to see, as especially once we switch the bulk, that it kind of switches to being more mountainous. So I'm going to bring this down. And now the next thing I'm going to create is right click and type in mountain range, which is really your basic starter kind of landscape that you can use. So this is our mountain range, but as you can see, it's very weak in the sense of no height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the height to be much higher, so we actually have something to work with. And then I'm going to change the seed a little bit to get something that's a little more mountain rangey through the middle. I kind of like this. Now, whenever you want to combine two nodes, what you can do is just zoom in and grab one of the outs and drag it to the other out. And when you do that, it is going to create a combined node. So this is how our scene or landscape is looking right about now. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add in a rugged node. So if I click on this and drag out, you're going to have the menu pop up again, and I'm going to type in rugged. Now, what rugged does is kind of just add some rough edges to your landscape, which I want, because what I'm going to do is add some rough edges and then kind of file it down again to get a more realistic mountain setting. So this is rugged. I'm going to just increase the scale a little bit. We don't need too much. If I decrease it to 0, it's kind of like a lot. So let me keep it right here. And then I'm going to drag across and type in thermal shaper, which is going to just kind of take out all the unnecessary roughness and just keep all the sharp edges, which I think are going to look a lot more mountainous at the end. And then after thermal shaper, I'm going to drag across again and type in erosion and choose erosion 1, which is going to, again, kind of add in the erosion and sell the effect of mountains a little more. Now, the next thing we can do is go over to the erosion, and I want to add in some rivers to our scene. So I can drag across and type in rivers, and it will now simulate rivers in our scene. Now, if you want, let me just rearrange this. If you want, you can kind of adjust this however you want. You can add in more water, less water. You can change the actual depth, or sorry, the down cutting of the actual river itself. So this is a nice way of kind of creating realistic or weathered canyons. But in our case, I'm going to increase the rivers a little more so it keeps more on the end of like alpine mountain-esque look. And then I'm going to drag out and add in snow, which is now going to simulate where snow is going to land on our scene. And then again, you can change the settings like the duration. I'm going to decrease the duration, but then we get all these kind of like spots on our landscape, which I don't like. So I'm going to increase the intensity, but decrease the duration to kind of combat that look a little. And then you can also change the settle duration as well. I kind of don't want it to look like this. I want a little more mountain jutting out. So maybe more like springtime, which I like a little more. And then we can increase the intensity and increase the duration a little bit to get rid of some of the dots. So it's a little more billowy snow. And now we have a pretty good look. Now, generally speaking, we've kind of created our landscape. The next part to this would be kind of jumping in and coloring our landscape. So we have some PNGs we can play with. But the one thing I do want to note is whenever you're kind of done building your landscape and you feel like you have all the nodes you need to use to create the landscape you're going for, it's really nice to be able to lock your last node so you can adjust your prior nodes. And what I mean by that is right now I'm clicking on snow, but if I want to say adjust the Perlin, it's going to look like this, which doesn't really show me how it's going to look on the last node once it's kind of processed through everything. So what you can do is click on snow, click F, and if I zoom in here, you're going to see this little green symbol right here. And what this means is we just locked this node. So the viewport is going to be locked on that node. So now if I click over to Perlin, it's still on the last node, and I can adjust Perlin to kind of see its effect as it's going through all the other nodes. So now that I have that done, I can kind of play around with the scale a little, play around with the octaves and the gain to kind of get the overall look I'm going for. I can click on here and kind of switch you to add to see how you look once that's all done. And I can play around with each of these to get the general look I'm going for. Low. Its height can be reduced. Its amplitude. There we go. I want it to be a little more flat and slightly mountainous at the end of the day. And then if you're ever feeling like you're not really getting the general look that you want, you can also adjust the seed to get the same parameters but new looks involved as well, which is super helpful. So I'm going to play around with the seed here until I get something that I like. Okay, so I like this, but now I'm going to go over to the rugged node, and I don't really like how high up our height is, our height difference on all kind of like four corners. So I'm going to increase the scale here to kind of reduce that effect a little. And then I can go over here to the thermal shaper and adjust that as well. And then I can also go back to the original and play with the seed now that I have kind of the landscape a little more flattened out. Ooh, there we go. I like that. And then I can also adjust the height. So it's a little more higher up when I want it to be. I can go over here and adjust this height as well. Even switch it to Alpine to kind of get a different look. And then now I'm feeling pretty happy with how our mountain is looking. So now that that is all done, the next thing we can do is go over here and create a choke point. Now, choke point is really just helpful because it's going to denote where we've kind of ended our landscape building part and moving on to the coloring part. So I like choke points just because it kind of helps me remember, okay, the landscape building is from like the left, and now we're kind of moving into the texture part. So now we have the text, so now that we have the choke point created, I can go over here and create a texture base. And clicking on the texture base node, I'm going to go over here to snow, click F to unclick it, and then go over to texture base. And what this is really just kind of creating a map to help you understand where the texture lies. And we can adjust this by kind of playing with the slope, the flow, the soil, the patches, and things like that. So this is really going to tell our next node how to color our scene. So the next node is going to be, and I'm going to pull it out and add a sat map. Now, the sat map is how we are going to color our actual scene. So this is going to show a bunch of different sat options on the right here, which is going to help you kind of adjust your scene. Now, generally speaking, whenever you look at mountains, they're more on the gray end. So I'm going to go over here and kind of find something that's a little more gray and fits the mountain vibe much better than what we already had. I think I liked my first option right off the bat. But let me keep looking. I think this works. And then if you want to make any changes to how it's kind of laid out, I can click F on the sat map, go back to the texture base, kind of just play with the flows and things like that to get the different color I'm looking for. So I can really tailor the way our sat map is laid over our scene. So I can add in some chaos, include peaks, and then kind of adjust the soil and things like that to get the general look and feel of the mountain that we want to create. So now that this is done, the next thing I want to do is kind of go over how we can use prior nodes to help color our landscape with a little more detail. And by doing that, we're going to be learning how to mask. So I'm going to kind of highlight all this and bring it down just so I can get some more space. And I'm going to bring this texture map down and drag from the choke point to create another, or sorry, not a texture map. I'm going to bring the sat map down and drag from the texture base to create one more sat map. And that is going to be for our rivers. So to do that, I'm going to click on the sat map, go over to blue, and I'm going to pick something a little more glacial, maybe like this. And if I click on it, first F to get rid of this. If I click on it, now our entire landscape is blue, which is not really what we're going for. What we want to do is kind of mix these together and use the river node as a mask so we can let the software understand that everything blue is supposed to be the river and everything not blue or not the river is supposed to be the landscape. So to do that, I'm going to click on this out point and bring it up to this out point, and it is going to create a combine node. So what we're going to want to do is go over here to the river node, and we're going to click on this right here, which is our depth. So I'm going to drag out, and when the menu pops up, I'm going to just type in FX to get a slight adjustment node so we can kind of pronounce the look of the rivers or the depth of the river. So once I create the FX node, the next thing I'm going to do is click on auto level and then equalize to kind of get a better idea of where our rivers lie. Once I have that, I can then drag this and bring it over here to this little dot under the combine node, which is going to tell it to separate or mask out the rivers. And by doing so, our scene is now showing where the rivers are, and they're blue, and then where the landscape is, and that is our sat map. Okay, so now that we have finished creating our landscape, the next thing we need to do is set up some nodes to help the program understand what information we want out of Gaea to help create our landscape in Unreal Engine. So the interesting thing is recently in the past few updates for Gaea, they've introduced an actual Unreal Engine node, which helps it export specifically for Unreal Engine. So what we're going to do is first go over here to the snow node, click on this snow output, drag it down and type in Unreal. And what we're going to do with this is going to be our mask to let Unreal know where snow is supposed to be and where snow's not supposed to be. The next thing we're going to do is go to the choke point, which is going to be exporting our actual landscape. Drag that out and click on Unreal. This is going to be where our landscape is actually exported out of. And then the last thing is we want the PNG for the landscape we created. So for that, I'm going to go over to the combine node, again, drag out and type in Unreal. Now, in my case, I have mine already set up to 5033. In your case, there's a chance that you're probably using the free version of this. So this is going to say 1K, which is perfectly fine. Now, the one thing I do want to note is on this section right here, you can do the automatic size or the don't size retextures. That's completely fine. I would check that the output size is 5033. If you're not sure what the output size is, you can always go over here to Tools, Options. Actually, sorry about that. It's Project, Build Settings. And in Build Settings, you can adjust the resolution here. So choose whatever resolution you want. In your case, it's probably going to be 1K. In my case, it is 4K. And then close. So just make sure you remember this number because you will need to know it later once you kind of move these over to Unreal Engine. The other thing I want to note is this is currently kind of showing you 4 different options, which is height, mask, color, and weight. Since this is going to be a PNG of the actual color texture of our landscape, what we want is color. The next one is this node right here. Since this one is going to be an actual export of the height map itself, which is going to create our landscape. This is already exporting correctly on height. And then our last one is going to be color as well. So now that that is all set up, The next thing you can do is go over here to build and click build. So now that that is all set up, the next thing you want to do is go back over here to project, to build settings, and down to build. And you want to make sure you know where the build destination is. So in my case, it's going to be Gaea Landscape Build Snowy Mountains, and everything is going to be built there. The next thing you can do is kind of change some settings here if you want. I personally really appreciate when the folder opens up after the building process. So I have this clicked right here, but kind of go through these and pick whichever one you like. But you definitely want to know where the build destination is because that's where all these different texture and PNGs are going to export to. So I'm going to close that and go over here to build right here, go up to this little symbol and click build. And then you're going to see this pop up and I'm going to click start build. Now, while the building process is going on, the next thing you want to do is start setting up the actual plugin for Gaea to Unreal. So within the actual Gaea program, you're able to install the plugin that you're going to use for Unreal Engine. So if you go over here to Tools, you're going to see Install Plugins right here. You can click on that and click on Gaea to Unreal. Once you click on Gaea to Unreal, it's going to immediately redirect you and you're going to be able to download a Gaea to Unreal plugin. So you can click Save right there to download it. So once you've downloaded the plugin, the next thing you want to do is go find your actual Unreal Engine folder. So right now, the plugin only supports Unreal Engine 5.5, so that's what we're going to be using. So I'm going to go find my Unreal Engine 5.5, click on that, click on Engine, and then go down to Plugins. Now, once you click on Plugins, you can go over to where you have the download saved. So I'm going to go over there, click on Gaea to Unreal, and you're going to have these options right here, which is 5.3, 5.4, and 5.5. In my case, I'm going to be clicking 5.5. So unzip 5.5. And what you want to do is grab the Gaea Unreal tools and copy this over into your 5.5 folder. So in my case, if I scroll down, I should be able to find Gaea Unreal tools already in this folder. So what you want to do is just copy that and paste it into your plugins folder of where your 5.5 Unreal Engine folder is saved. Once you do that, you can now open up Unreal Engine. Okay, so now that you've opened up Unreal Engine 5.5, the next thing you want to do is set up the actual plugin that you just brought into your software. So to do that, go over to Edit, go down to Plugins, and if you did everything correctly and typed in Gaea, you're going to see the Gaea to Unreal plugin. So what you're going to do is click this check mark on the bottom right. You're going to see Restart button. Click that and restart your program. Okay, and then now that your project has opened back up, the next thing you do is to Control Space to bring up the content browser, and we're going to create a new level. So I'm going to right click, go over to level. I'm just name this Gaea _ tut, and then open it up. When you open it up, it's going to be completely black. So I'm going to go over to Window, go to, where is it? I'm blind. There we are. Environment Light Mixer, and turn all these on all the way across to get everything in. Now, the next thing you want to do is actually bring in our landscape. So to do that, you can go up here to this little symbol right here, which is the Gaea logo and has been added into your scene once you've enabled the plugin. So I'm going to click on that, go down to import height map, and then navigate to where you saved your build files. And once you do that, you're going to be seeing these 4 textures. So the one you want to choose is the choke point out. So I'm going to click on that and then click open. Now, there's one last thing you want to check before you kind of move forward, which is the scale. So right now, if I kind of add this in, the scale is going to be a little off. And what you want to do is make sure that the scale is matched all the way across. So in my case, I'm going to click on this, make it 1, 2, 3. Nope. Do I have number lock? I do. 123.977196, and then create landscape. And then once you scroll up, you will see your landscape now inside Unreal Engine. Now, the next thing we want to do to kind of set up our landscape is create the material that we're going to add to it. Now, there's 2 different ways we can go about this. One is using the material that we kicked out of Gaea. The other is kind of using new materials from Quixel. And then the last one is bringing in an auto material. I'll be going over all of them. So the first thing we want to do is kind of go over to Window and open up Fab. Once we open up Fab, we're going to want two different textures for this. One is for the rock and one is for the snow. So the first thing to do for me is I'm just go over to Quixel. And once I'm inside Quixel, I can kind of scroll down, turn on include 3D compatible formats. I don't know why they don't have that already on. And then I'm just going to type in snow and find a snow material to download. I'm not going to show you which snow material because it really doesn't matter, but just go through and pick a snow material that you think fits. Any of these materials will work just fine. The next one is rock. And again, exact same thing. Just find a rock material that you think fits what you're going for and download it. Just make sure it's material. Once you do that and bring it into your scene, the next thing you can do is right click, go over to material and name this M_landscape and open it up. Now that you've opened it up, I'm going to make it full screen, do Control Space and find my Fab folder where I have my surfaces. I'm going to bring in my rock cliff, which is this right here. And then I'm going to go over to the snow and bring in the snow as well. And then I'm just going to orient them so they are all kind of lined up appropriately. This is a T and this one is a B. I'm not actually sure the difference between the two. I do know T is supposed to be the texture. Let me click on this to make sure. So this actually is B. So maybe it's B stands for albedo. So I'll keep the B and then delete the texture since you don't need that. And then align these as well. Now, the next thing we want to do is right click and add in a layer blend, which is going to help us blend the layer together. So it's a landscape layer blend. And then you can click on your actual landscape node at the very end, go over here to use material attributes and click this on, which is going to bring this down to a single pin. And then I'm going to bring the layer over here and plug these two in. Now, the next thing we want to do is kind of create a little more space, right click and name this make material attributes. And then we can copy this and paste it. So we have two. And we can now zoom in and plug in our texture into our base color. This is our normal map right here. So this one is going to go into normal. And then when Unreal Engine or Epic Games kind of updated it and moved everything to Fab, Quixel switched over from ORDs to ORMs. Not the biggest fan, but ORM is basically ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So each of these is a texture pack. If I click on it, you're going to see, let me click out. If I go red, you see a texture piece. If I unclick red and go green, there's a different texture piece. It's kind of hard to tell, but it is there. And then if I go B, nothing's in the metallic, but something is technically supposed to be there. So if I go out, actually, sorry, cancel. If I click out of this, so ORM is in the same order of RGB. So O connects to R connects to G, and then M connects to B. So R is going to be your ambient occlusion, and then G is going to be your roughness, and then there's nothing in B, so you don't need to plug that into anything. And then following that same kind of thing, you're going to do that with these textures as well. So the albedo is going to go to base color. The normal is going to go into normal. And then the R is ambient occlusion and the G is roughness. Now that that is done, we need to tell the software or the material how large the landscape is. So to kind of kick this off, I'm going to do a landscape coordinate and plug this into all of these. And as I said in the beginning, you want to remember the actual resolution of the landscape that you used. In my case, I'm using 4033, a 4K size landscape. And right here is where you can input that landscape size. So I'm going to go 4033. And now it is telling this that it needs to be the size of 4K for one block, which truthfully isn't what we're going to want at the end of the day, but it is helpful when you're going to bring in the actual texture that you brought out of Gaea. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here and plug it in. Then just checking, make sure it's 4033 and 4033. Perfect. Now the last piece of this is setting up the landscape layer blend. If you click on the landscape layer blend, you're going to see this little plus sign here on the left. Click that twice to get 2 different layer blends. And then the top one can be rock and the bottom one can be snow. And then we can plug them in. Once you're done doing that, you set up your material. So you can go over here to apply, save, and exit out. Now we can go back to where our landscape was saved. I'm going to right click on it and do create material instance. That way we have a material instance. I'm going to click on the material instance, click on the landscape, and then click on this little arrow right here to add the material to the landscape. And what's going to happen is something crazy. It's going to turn black. Okay, so now that that material is added, the next thing you want to do is go over here to where it says selection mode and switch over to landscape mode. And then in prior versions of Unreal Engine, it would already kind of populate with the layers. For some reason, as they updated it, they kind of changed it. So now what you need to do is kind of click this button right here, which is create layers from assigned materials. And then the layers will populate in. And then once you have the layers, you can go over here to this plus sign and click weighted blended layer or weight blended layer. And I'm just going to save it to the content folder. And then do the same thing for the snow one as well. So now that we have that in, the next thing we need to do is tell Unreal Engine where the snow is supposed to be and where it's not to be. So to do that, we're going to go over here to the Manage tab, go over here to Import, and then down here, you're going to see Snow. You want to click that on, and then go over here to these 3 dots, click on that, and it's going to bring you over to these textures. What you want to do is click on this one and click Open. Once that's done, click Import, and it'll go through the process of importing the actual texture onto our landscape. And if everything goes well, we're going to have a good little mask of where snow should and should not be. So this is how you're going to go about setting up your landscape in Unreal Engine. Now, if you want to use the actual landscape material or texture that you kicked out, the only thing you need to do is go over here to the actual material itself, open that up. I suggest using a normal and an ORM from a separate piece so you can kind of let it know or give it some texture. But you can also import. So I'm going to do Control Space in the content browser, click Import, and then go to where the texture was saved. And you can bring in your T-combine out texture. Once that's done, you can drag it over here and you can use it same way you're using the Quixel version of it. So I can just move this out and then click Apply and Save. And once I do that, exit, I am now going to be using the texture we kind of kicked out of Unreal Engine. So that is one way you can kind of go about it. And then the last way you can go about it is by using an auto material. So to do that, I can switch this over to selection mode, and I can go over to Window, go over to Fab, and type in auto material. And once I type in auto material, there's going to be a bunch of different options, but the one we're looking for is free, which is this one right here, the MW Landscape Auto Material. So if you want, I'm going to switch this over to personal, and you can add this to your project. Once you add this to your project, you can then add it to your scene. So once the auto material is added to your scene, you can go over here to where it says MW Landscape Auto Material. Click on that, go over to Materials, Landscape, and then I'm just going to click on the landscape mountain range, click on the actual landscape itself, and add it. Now the auto material is very helpful because it is already a fully functional setup material that is way more advanced than anything I went over today. And it's going to help you kind of adjust and create your scene. And it will give you some very realistic results as you see right here. So right out the box, just adding it into our scene, it already looks really good. And it's actually emulating what we already created in Gaea. So this is super helpful. And on top of it, you can adjust it as needed. to kind of get the overall look and feel you're going for. So in the case of this, you can kind of empty or enter the snow, the dirt, the grass, and you can switch out these textures for any other texture to get exactly what you're looking for. And then you can also change the parameters to adjust this heavily again to get the look you're going for. So I hope this is super helpful because I want to give you a full overview on how to create your landscape in Gaea, bring it into Unreal Engine, and how to get the correct material going so you can get the look and feel that you want for your landscape. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and per usual, please like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys on the next one.